Hello, everybody, and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another book haul. A small one, it's only 5 books and 2 extras. And that doesn't make sense right now, of course, but it will once you watch the video. And it's a themed book haul. You probably already saw the hashtag Read Palestine, and no, I'm not going to talk about politics. This is a booktube channel, not a political channel, but I do think, certainly in the situation that we are in now, it's important to educate yourself. It's important to read. Reading is what I do in order to understand the world. And a week ago, from the end of November until the 5th of December, it was Read Palestine Week. If you go to Twitter, or X as it's now called, hashtag Read Palestine, you will find all kinds of information, and I will also leave a link down below. But basically, it was a group of publishers who got together and wanted to encourage us readers to read books by Palestinian authors, fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and they provided a whole series of books for free. And even though, and I have the sniffles, I'm sorry about that. And even though the Read Palestine Week is over, the books are still accessible. I think I checked yesterday, so they were still accessible. So that's why the link also provides for free ebooks if you're interested. For me, like I said, books are always the way to understand the world, and especially a world that I'm not familiar with. So I downloaded a couple of those free books, but I also bought 5 books by Palestinian authors. 4 fiction, 1 nonfiction, a variety of authors and timelines in order to read more and understand more about Palestinian life. The first 2, I'm sorry about the sniffles, but we're just going to roll with it. The first 2 are by the same author, and as I understood, she is one of the most well-known English writing Palestinian authors. She is an American Palestinian born to refugees. She lives in, I think, Pennsylvania. Susan Abulhawa, and I bought her debut novel and her latest novel. Her debut novel is Mornings in Jenin, published in 2006, and it's the story of a family told through the youngest sibling, Amal. It starts in 1948. When the family has, or the mother has to escape the war, and then we see the story through Amal's eyes, and Amal later is a refugee or an immigrant in the United States. So this book covers the, let's say, time frame after the Second World War, the 1948 ongoing. Her latest book, Susan Abulhawa's latest book, is called Against the Loveless World, and that was published in 2019. And I thought that was the premise was interesting because the book is told from the perspective of Nar, N-A-H-R, who is serving a life sentence in an Israeli prison. She's a Palestinian, considered a terrorist. Others consider her a freedom fighter. You know, that is always this very difficult definition of depending on your political viewpoint. But I thought it was very interesting and also challenging to write a book from that perspective. I was also interested, of course, because it's from the perspective of a woman. Most of the time when we think of fighters or terrorists or soldiers, we think of men, which is of course not true. There are many women also involved, and this is from the perspective of a woman. So that interested me as well, but also the moral implication. What will the author do with this perspective? So I'm really very much looking forward to reading this. The next book is also by a very, I think, well-known author, born in London, so not an American Palestinian, but a British Palestinian, Isabella Hammad. It's also her debut, The Parisian, and this one is set earlier. Like I said in the introduction, I wanted to have a broader perspective, also in terms of time. So this is opening in 1914, just when the First World War was about to start. And it's told from the perspective of Midhat Kamal, who leaves Palestine in 1914 to study medicine in France. He falls in love there, but also returns to Palestine. So it's his life story from starting as a young medical student in 1914, and I think it goes up to the Second World War, if I'm not mistaken. So a different time frame and a different aspect in terms of not so much a refugee story, but an immigrant or a Palestinian living abroad, but also returning to Palestine. So yeah, I'm really also interested in that perspective. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Isabella Hammad just had a new book out. Let me just check whether that's right. I think it's called Exit Ghost, or maybe I mixed her up with somebody else. No, Enter Ghost, not Exit Ghost, but Enter Ghost. And that was published, yes, in April. And if I like this one, I will certainly also buy her newest. And then we have another debut book by an author who is a Palestinian American, a poet, but also a clinical psychologist. And the book is called Salt Houses by Hala Alian, and published a couple of years ago. I'm sorry, 2017. And this one starts later than the others in 1963. It's a multi-generational story of a family with a Palestinian family with a focus on the female voices of that family, told from multiple perspectives. And it starts with Salma, like I said, in 1963, the day before the wedding of her youngest daughter, Aliyah. And her family, she lived in Jaffa. She and her husband lived in Jaffa and then had to flee in 1948, settled in Nablus. And it's a story of continuous refugeedom, if that is a word, from Jaffa to Nablus, from Nablus to Kuwait, from Kuwait to Beirut to Amman. So every generation has a different refugee story, starting in the 1960s. It's the only book that I have already read half, and I really, I think it's really good. What I like about this type of book is that it's not ignoring politics. Certainly not possible in that time period. And as a Palestinian refugee, for instance, if you start in the 1960s, you will have the war of 1967. But it's not, the politics is embedded in the life of the family and in the in the fate of the family. And I really like that because it gives me a less abstract idea of what it would be like. So this one so far, I'm halfway through, is I really like. And then I bought one. Really sorry about the sniffling. I think I'm getting a cold. But this one is a collection of essays. It's about 30 essays or so by various authors, Susan Abulhawa being one of them. And it's called This Is Not a Border, Reflections on Palestine from the Palestine Festival of Literature in 2018. The Palestine Festival of Literature was established in 2008, and it says here, bringing together writers from all corners of the globe. It aims to help Palestinian break through culturally, so that we learn something about Palestinian culture. And this is the 10th anniversary edition, where you have a message by Kutsi and Chanwa Achebe. So I'm interested to read that. It's basically short essays, but also poems, little short stories. So it's not entirely nonfiction. It's just a collection of various views on that topic. And like I said in the beginning, those are the 5 books that I bought. But there are also 2 extras, and those are 2 books that I've read by Palestinian authors that I would like to recommend. And the first one is nonfiction. Asma El Ghul, together with the writer Selim Nassib, wrote A Rebel in Gaza, translated from the French by Mike Mitchell, published in 2018. And I already talked about this book quite a bit in recent reads. But for those of you who didn't watch that, Asma El Ghul is a Palestinian growing up in Gaza, not in Gaza City, but in the Gaza Strip. And she writes, these are short essays talking about her growing up. It starts when she is, I think, 5 or 6, goes into her early 20s. And what I thought was really well done is getting across the tensions from all sides that she experienced as a Palestine girl and then young woman. So you have the tension of the constant either war or Israeli soldiers marching into the house, searching the house, people getting arrested. But there's also the tension from the other side, because some members of her family, 2 uncles, join Hamas, and they pressure her, to wear the veil, to act in a certain way appropriate for a woman in their from their point of view. And then there is the generational tension, because she grew up in Gaza. This is her home. But the older family members, especially the ones who actually had to flee from their homes after 1948, they look at Gaza and their life there as something temporary. They mourn the loss, of course, the loss of what they had, the home that they had, and they don't want to take root in Gaza. They don't want to settle in Gaza, because what they want is to return. But younger people, as she describes, this is my home. So it's not something that I look at with the eyes of, well, this is only temporary. No, this is my home. This is where I feel at home. So I thought these various tensions that she experiences as a young girl, child, woman, were really interesting. Like I said, published 2018, so before the war. Her experience is not about the current situation. And then, of course, I have to mention probably the most famous, I think, at least outside of Palestine, most famous Palestinian author, Adania Shibli. This is minor detail, obviously, translated by Elizabeth Jacquet from the Arabic and published in 2019, if I'm not mistaken. 2018. And the original, no, that's not true. I'm looking at the wrong book. Sorry, 2017. And I came across this book because it was longlisted for the Booker International. Adania Shibli has written she was born in Palestine, by the way, in 1974, and she written 2 previous novels, Touch, translated by Paula Haidar in 2010, and We Are All Equally Far From Love, translated by Paul Starkey, 2012. I haven't read yet or bought any of those 2, but this is so brilliant that I will certainly buy the other 2. So this is has 2 timelines. The main timeline is from the perspective of a young woman, Palestinian woman living in Palestine, in the West, I think it's the West Bank, but I'm not sure anymore. I'm sorry. This is really horrible. But anyway, that's not the point. Is that this young woman, wants to investigate the murder of another Palestinian woman many, many, many years ago, decades ago, in 1948. This other Palestinian woman was raped and killed by Israeli soldiers and buried in the sand, and she wants to investigate. It's a tiny little book, but it carries more than one punch. It's not easy to read, I can tell you. The violence is very in your face. So especially violence against women, I have a hard time reading, but it is an excellent book that I can certainly recommend. And I think Adania Shibli, like I said, is together with Susan Abulhawa, probably one of the most well-known and respected Palestinian contemporary authors. So this one. Anyway, these were the 5 books, 4 fiction, 1 non-fiction, Palestinian authors that I bought, and the 2 that I recommend. If you have recommendations, Palestinian authors, certainly, especially female authors, translated into English preferably, or German or Dutch, but preferably English, let me know down in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this video. Any other comment is also welcome, of course, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.